So there are people that get hurt, and it's never intentional. And I think business owners just go through this, and maybe this is why being a business owner can be so lonely, because you're not intentionally hurting people. But as you're going along, and sometimes you outgrow people, sometimes they don't want to come along, and sometimes you forget to bring them along. So I think to those people that maybe we did.
Welcome to the Married Making Millions podcast with, as you know, James and Angela. And we are going on to stage 2 of the 4 stages of entrepreneurship. So if you missed the first episode, please go back and check that out. The 4 stages are survival, status, freedom, and purpose. And today, Angela and I will be discussing status. And there's a lot of things that we'll talk about and just have these rabbit trails and digress on and talk about how it impacts marriages and how it impacts, obviously, the business, impacts your personal life as well. And so we'll just start off. Maybe, Angela, you could just talk a little bit about when do you feel like we got out of that survival stage that we talked about in the last episode, and we got into more of a status stage. And actually, maybe even before that, how would you define that stage of status?
Yeah, I think that after survival stage, you kind of reach this point where you're like, we're making money now, or the business is making money. And you start to get a little bit of like, I've worked really hard, and so now I feel like I should be able to have or spend some of this money that I feel like we've worked so hard to earn. So you start fighting with yourself a little bit on like keeping up with the Joneses type thing, where all of a sudden you kind of feel this little bit of ownership now, and what does an owner look like in your head, and you start just, I guess, fighting with this idea of having money now. Your business is successful. So I think that's where status starts, and it's a constant daily fight of what status should even look like.
Or if that's healthy.
Correct.
Because I would say that I think some people get stuck in status. There's a lot of people that get stuck there, and they don't want to move on to freedom. They don't want to move on to purpose.
Yeah.
And I think when you get stuck in that stage, again, this is only our viewpoint here and our opinion, but when you get stuck in that stage, it's very obvious to tell that someone is in a status stage. You don't even have to be a business owner or an entrepreneur. You could just be an executive that has a really great paying job, and all you care about is that status. You just care about that nice watch, the nice clothes, the nice car, the nice house, and like you said, keeping up with the Joneses. And so there's a lot of people, I think, that stay and live in that. So I think that's a good definition.
And what does, like, when you think of a business owner, what comes to mind? Or like, what do you envision? Where do we get this idea that a business owner looks a certain way, right? Or like somebody from a corporate job. We have this idea of what that looks like. Why?
I think it's just like when I was growing up, it was it's different than it was now. A business owner to me when I was growing up was like a mythical creature, right? Like you don't know, like they're there, you know of them. You know maybe their name, and somebody like has maybe met them like one time, but you didn't really meet them as a team member. You didn't really meet the business owner. At least that's what I thought. You know, I worked at Hannaford's as a bagger. I just had a manager and like a director. And I don't even think I talked to the director. Like the manager was the front end manager was like the one that you talked to, right? Like they were your immediate supervisor, and you weren't allowed to talk to the other people. I think that's at least how I grew up. I think a lot of people would understand that. The other thing, since we're talking about this a little bit, about the owner, because there's actually a lot here that we could unpack, but the owner back when I was working as a teenager, I looked at the owner like a very powerful individual. Like I was, until I got to know one of the owners I worked for, Donnie Daigle, who was on the McGuire Group podcast a while back, one of the first episodes. Love Donnie Daigle. So Donnie, if you're listening, super appreciate you, brother. But he was a great owner. He was firm. He was friendly. He was kind. He taught me a lot. But before I met him, I worked at this other place, and it was like the owner was a mythical creature. He came in and visited the store this one time, and everybody scurried like rats or mice. Like we just went and cleaned something or found something to do, right? Because that's what there was this healthy fear of, at any moment the owner could fire me, right? And so I think you asked that question, like where do we get that? Well, I think it was natural. Like think about the guys back in the industrial age. You got Carnegie and Rockefeller and these guys that were just tycoons in these businesses. They were cutthroat. They were ruthless. So I think that generation of workers instilled that in their kids, and their kids, and now my generation, the millennial generation, I think was the last generation to have any sense of slight fear, healthy fear of the owner, who they were, what they did, where they were working. Because now, we're digressing here, but I think this is a good path, and I'll ask you a question about it here in a second. But now I think ownership is looked at as a bad thing. Like the owners are these horrible people that are just trying to squeeze the penny out of everybody, or a nickel out of everybody. Now that's not 100% true. Again, it's my opinion as an owner. Sometimes that's how you feel from the team member level. When you get to your leadership level, your managers, your directors, things like that, it's a much different relationship, I think, than it was even when I knew a couple of my owners. So I know we're digressing a little bit, but you asked the question a little bit about, where did that kind of like ownership and stuff come from? I think from the earlier generations, the owner was looked at as this kind of powerful person. And I think that's a persona. Every owner's very different. And we can talk a little bit more about that. But the question that I would have for you is, where do you think this status level, right, survival status, for you and I, where do you feel like there was a change from survival kind of to that status change?
I would say it was a couple different things. And we talked about this in survival. One of the things that helps you get out of survival is to have the right people in the right places. Mm-hmm. So I would say once we had that going and we were able to step back and look at the building situation, what we were creating and building together, we were able to step back and watch it run without us. That is when I think we kind of were out of that survival stage and hit the status stage. The other obvious part of that is also the financial side, right? Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, there was money coming in. We were in the positive. Things were going well. And we were able to then start having an income from the stores. Mm-hmm. So I'd say those were the two big things that, in my mind, kind of switched us from survival to status.
And we were always, the stores were always making money. We just didn't take it.
We didn't take it.
We didn't take it because we were growing the business.
Right.
So once we get to a point where it was healthy, the business was very healthy, and we were able to take some and pay ourselves from all the work we had done and the investment that we had put in, is kind of probably where that changed.
Well, and that's what I mean. Like all of a sudden you feel this like, okay, now we're out of survival. Now I feel entitled to some sort of compensation for all of the work that we put in. And so I think that you do fight that a little bit as you enter into status. Yeah.
I would say, and I'll just be vulnerable here. Am I allowed to be vulnerable?
Of course.
I think that we did get into that stage, and I felt like I wanted to celebrate it, by getting you a new car. Because we had pretty crappy cars for our whole, for 10 years of marriage. And I told myself when I was younger, I would never buy a brand new car. I would never do it. Here I go, buy a brand new car. And, whether you agree or you disagree, it is what it is. But the point is here is we're talking about this status. And so for me, I really wanted my wife to drive the best. I wanted her to drive. And this is a James thing. Angela's not like this. And I think there's very different people, and you could talk to this. There's very different types of people. We talked a little bit about money on one of our other episodes, which was a really good episode, by the way. But I like the finer things in life. I like quality over quantity. I would rather buy t-shirts that will last me 2 years of good quality than buy 14 t-shirts from TJ Maxx. Now, don't get me wrong, I have a beautiful TJ Maxx t-shirt on right now that has actually lasted quite a while. So I'm a big fan. But when it came to that car, when it came to other things, I wanted you to have the best, or what I think is, or thought is the best at the time. And so I think it's not all about spending either. I don't think status is all about spending. I think it's also about the way you carry yourself. I think your attitude can change. And so those are some things that I think when I look back, I recognize, we were in that stage.
Let me ask you this. What do you think the status symbol in America is? Like, what would you say, like, people look at X, Y, and Z and they think
you're successful?
Status. Yes.
I think it's what we drive and what we maybe wear. Because it's what you see on the outside. Sure. It doesn't matter what somebody has in their bank account, right? But I would say more often than not, if you're just talking like financial success or like accumulation, I think more often than not, people that drive a Toyota, a used car, I don't mean just Toyota, I just mean like that great quality brand, few years old, are the ones that have substantial retirement savings, substantial investments, and the ones, and not always, and the ones that are driving the luxury BMWs and the luxury vehicles are not the same way. Again, so just a broad stroke, my opinion. I've seen a lot of financial clients in my years of doing finances, and that's kind of what I saw was we had more money put into our vehicles.
Vehicles, houses.
And our houses, yeah, than the savings, the investments, the business, so on and so forth.
So what would you say we fought? What was important to us as we reached that status? Yeah, we bought a new car, but what would you say like we kind of made of more importance as we reached that status level, or we fought each day to kind of make more important?
Am I supposed to know the answer to this question?
No, I'm just curious
thinking back,
if you're...
I think maybe time.
Yeah.
Secretly, I think, like I didn't know back then enough about time than I do today. Because time is now my most important, like I try to hoard the time that I can get. So I would say back then I think it was time, because I remember just trying to get more time off, be with you, and then obviously we had Lila, so get more time off. I think we really enjoyed a couple of vacations.
Which again is time, right?
Right, we took like 2-week vacations once a year, right, when we went to Florida. So I think that was...
Well, and that's funny too that you say time, because I feel like the opposite is true. Again, like I feel like a status symbol in America is busyness, right? Like if you're busy,
Agreed.
Like you're successful, right? So like we wanted the opposite of that. We didn't want to be busy. We wanted to slow down a little bit. And I think too, to be fully transparent, there was this part where like you want to spend money, you want to, be paid what you earn.
Absolutely.
But I would say we both quickly were like,
this does nothing.
This is not...
Brings us no joy.
Right. This is
Great
not
car,
fulfilling
the seat fits my butt well, but...
This is not fulfilling in any sort of way.
Yeah.
And so I think this idea and this picture that people have of business owners and entrepreneurs and status level and all of that, it is not true, or like it's all false.
It's all false. It's very false. It's very facade-ish.
Yes.
So that's why I would say, you know, if you feel like you're in that stage, and it's okay. Like I think everybody goes through. You
have to go through it, just like you go through survival.
Right. But the question is will you get out of it, or will you just stay in it? I think we were probably in that status stage for a year and a half. Year and a half.
I would say 6 to 8 months. We were like in it, and then we very quickly realized how unfulfilling that those things are.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. And I think the survival stage for us probably lasted a year.
2.
Well, to a certain extent, like a solid year hustle, a solid year hustle. So that would have been, 2020 to 2021, end of 2021, really, I think. And then 2022, we kind of started getting some breathing room with 3 stores open, a better team, things like that. So those would be some things to think about. Now, here's some caution that I would really give is, thankfully, we were on the upward trajectory of building, right? We had 3 locations going, and then I think we entered that status level, if you will. But we had another 4 to do, 5 to do. And so there's a lot of growth, a lot of natural progression. So if income was X, substantially we knew that it was going to increase 3-4 times what it currently was. So the caution that I would say to folks listening, if you feel like you're in this type of a stage, is if you're only opening 1 location or 2 locations, you need to be really, really cautious. And I am not this way. I'm not disciplined like this. Jeff is like this, my brother and partner, in the aspect of we don't touch any money until we know we're good. If everything were to go down and under in COVID and all these things, outside forces were to attack us, could we survive 6, 8, 10 months, right? And then I think you're kind of bulletproof. That's not a long time, but that's a good enough time to come up with some solutions, plans, hustle, figure it out. And so what I would say is my caution to some out there that maybe are in this stage is you need to be really careful that you don't get too aggressive in the stage of just buying and fulfilling that status hound, if you will, of letting everybody know that you're a business owner, letting everybody know that you do well, because that can quickly turn around just as fast as it came. I don't know if you agree or disagree with that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and to be honest, I think like our heart's desire is that people don't know that we own businesses. There's a guy from our old church that owned several businesses and made a lot of money and did a lot of good things with it, and you wouldn't even know who he was.
I don't even know who you're talking about. I think I know. Yeah, I think I know who you're talking about. But that's what we want to be, right?
And I mean that's just our.
And I would say that's
desire.
A person who's in a different stage. He's not in that status.
Correct.
Stage.
He left the status stage probably a long time ago.
Yeah.
But that's our hope and our prayer. Not that we don't want material things, or that we don't fight those things, or that we
that they're not okay,
or that they're not okay. There are something that I think, again, it goes back to your motivation and your heart behind it.
Yeah.
And so just checking on that daily. And as a Christian entrepreneur, I think that's something that we can all work on and continue to do, is check our hearts and our motivation and our desires. What's our top priority?
Yeah. So that status stage is really something that can, and not to get too aggressive here, if you will, but really can enslave you. You can really be driven by what's that next thing. I've got the clothes, I've got the townhouse, but I want a 5-bedroom house, and I want the pool, and I want the tennis court or the pickleball court, and I'm going to work my butt off until I get there. And while I'm on my way there, I'm going to have X, Y, and Z, and so I think the world is just an ever-consuming black hole for this stage.
Well, and it's never enough, and I think that's the piece that kind of holds people up, is like it's because it's unsatisfying, you just want the next thing. You know, you buy the brand new car and then it's like, well, a newer model comes out, so you want the next one. You buy a new phone, then the next model comes out, so you want another one. It's just this continuous, black hole. I don't know, because it's
it just sucks you down.
never enough.
Right.
And so you're continually chasing something that will never satisfy.
I think it's an education piece too. It's a knowledge and education piece around money and how money should be used. And I would say after we get out of this stage and moved into the freedom stage, which we'll talk about on the next episode, I would say we started to understand and got more of an education on how money actually works and what it's actually used for. The way I define money is it's a tool. It's no different than a hammer. A hammer is to help you build a house or to help you take a house down, right? Did you like that analogy? That was pretty good. I just came up with that. This is pretty good. Because I'm thinking about the claw on the backside. What can I say about that? So anyway, the hammer. You could build a house with it. You could use it for good. Or you could use that hammer for bad, tear down a house, right? Do some demolition, what have you. And so I think that's very important to think about when you're talking about money. And I realized this too late in life. I'm glad I learned it as, I guess, early as I did too, is that it's just a tool. And we talked about this, I think, on the last episode, is money just gives you options. That's all it does. You have money to either buy a MacBook or you can buy a Dell or a Microsoft Surface. You have money that you can buy furniture from Wayfair or you can buy it from Our House or Our House or whatever it's called, right? I don't even know. So that's literally all it does. So the other thing with money is it's relative. And this is something that I learned too. If I make $50,000 a year, a $1,500 MacBook is really expensive, right? Yeah. If I make $500,000 a year, and I understand that that MacBook is a tool and is going to allow me to operate well, my business, email, whatever I do with it, $1,500 is, I don't want to say it's nothing, but it's relative for that person's income. It is a very small percentage versus if my income is $50,000. I know that's two very big extremes. And so the reason I'm saying that is when you move into those different stages, you start to look at money differently. Whereas when you're not making a lot, status is so important to you because you want people to believe that you make a lot and that you have so many different options. Is that making sense?
Yeah, but it also goes back to what we talked about a few episodes ago on your mindset, scarcity mindset versus an abundance mindset. And I think when you do have an income coming in and your mind has switched, you have that abundance mindset, you don't care about those things as much.
Sure.
In ways. I mean, there's things that are still important to different people, but I'm just saying I think that with that mindset shift, your priorities kind of rearrange as well.
I agree. I would agree with that. I think, I think that's a part of the whole process of learning, growing, getting that knowledge. Right, is understanding that money's a tool. And I didn't learn that until maybe a year and a half ago, really. 2 years ago, year and a half ago, 2022, mid-2022, when we were trying to figure out taxes and just learning all the tax codes and all these different things on how we keep more money and don't give it to the government, right? So there's some thoughts there. But when you move out of that status stage, it's important to understand that even in the status stage, I don't think I would have been able to receive that type of a comment that money's relative and it's a tool when I was in that stage. I don't know what you think.
Or even in survival. In survival, I feel like it's probably even worse because you're working so hard.
Yeah.
To be.
You didn't even care about money. In the survival stage, you literally. I didn't even care about it. I don't even remember getting paid. I know we got paid, but it was nothing to me.
But you're still building towards something, right? Like you're hoping that in the end it pays off. right? You're not just working to work.
Correct.
You're hoping to build something that creates
Yes.
and generates an income.
Correct. But it wasn't even the thought. I think when you get into the survival stage, you're more
head's
focused on
down.
the profit and loss. You're more focused on what's coming in. You're more focused on, I want more revenue coming so that you can use it.
You mean in status?
Correct. I'm sorry, that's what I meant. Yeah, I don't know if I said survival, yeah. So in that survival stage, it was less about monitoring the P&L, profit and loss, monitoring the revenue, monitoring the sales. You're just trying to make sure that you have cookies so you can sell stuff. But then that status, I think there becomes that change of like, oh no, we need to monitor this. Oh, we need to get labor down big time.
Well,
we need to...
Right, you're stepping back. Remember I said that once you have those people in place, you're able to like get your head out of the ground and step back. And that's when you see all of those things, which I think is important, right? You want to get to that step so that you can see and monitor those things because they do impact your business.
Correct.
So, you need to do that. The other thing the last thing I was thinking about status was, I think for a lot of people too, status is the recognition or the name, right? Like you think about titles.
Sure.
Some people really truly care about what their title is in the business. And I think that comes maybe from like a respect aspect maybe. Well, why would you say that a name or a title is important to some people? Like that's a status level that they're trying to achieve.
Oh yeah, I agree with you 100%. I need to have my executive platinum status with American. Otherwise, what's the point in flying, right? No, I do agree with you. I think some people care more about the title than they do even money or income, right? Because it's that level of respect that people are required to give them, that they feel they've earned, and that they deserve to have. And so I do agree, and again, I think when you have that quote unquote leader, and John Maxwell talks about it a lot in his book, that person's a leader only by title. No one actually really wants to follow them, right? They actually want to get away from this person. And if you're losing a lot of people at your facility or your store or your business, then maybe you should check with the leadership, because maybe the leadership is just too focused on the title and isn't really leading the team. And we've had that happen, and I'm guilty of that a time or two. But to your point, where we are now, I really don't. People ask me what I do. Oh, I work remote. I have we own some businesses. I'm not like, oh, we own 17 crumble cookies and blah, blah, blah. I just think you're past that. But that takes time to grow and to learn through those conversations and that education and that leadership if you want to grow. We weren't satisfied with staying in that level of status or that level of survival. We weren't satisfied with that. We aren't satisfied with the level of freedom, and we want to find what our true purpose is. What is our true purpose? Why are we here on earth? I've been talking to our team about this a lot, because that's what motivates, right? And so when you're in this status level, it's really more about you, and it's selfish than it is about the team, the business, and other things. And so I'm sad that we had to go through that, because we probably hurt some people along the way, or maybe didn't take some people with us that we should have, right? But it's inevitable. It's really hard, I think, to skip that. Everybody has a little tiny bit. Might only be 6 weeks for some people, right? They buy a couple things, or they get that title and like, wow. And then like, this is not fulfilling, or this isn't where I want to be, or what have you. And then they move on. But I really do believe everybody has to go through that stage at one point or another.
I'm going to digress a little bit too, but I think you said something important that I think needs to be talked about, and you said that we hurt people along the way.
I hope we didn't hurt people. I think we might have.
But I think we do, and I think that's one piece of business that I think is really difficult and is not talked about enough, is the growth that happens and how it happens so quickly, and with your head in the sand. I think there's just pieces of you that are changing. Your business is changing. Your life is changing. So there are people that get hurt, and it's never intentional. And I think business owners just go through this, and maybe this is why being a business owner can be so lonely, because you're not intentionally hurting people. But as you're going along, and sometimes you outgrow people, sometimes they don't want to come along, and sometimes you forget to bring them along. So I think to those people that maybe we did hurt, we're sorry. We hope that things can eventually be reconciled. But to business owners, I think it's important that you realize that that sometimes is a sacrifice that has to be made. There are people that will love you through every single stage that you go through as a business owner. And those are the people that you got to hang on to, because that's very rare. There's people that will not understand the things that you're giving up. They're not going to understand the things that you're doing or why you're doing it. And that has to be okay. So status, I think, too, can be
a way to deal with that, to cope with that.
Yeah, like, I have sacrificed this, therefore I'm going to have this status so that maybe I'll get new friends, or maybe other people will want to join me, because it does feel lonely. So I would say that was one of the hardest things, was
leaving people behind.
Or just moving through these stages so quickly that none of it was intentional, but it still happened.
Right. Well, listen to Married Making Millions if you want to get involved in some drama and hear some emotion. Man, shoosh.
Yeah, sorry. But I think it's important. It's important to talk about, because people don't realize that that's a part of growing a business.
Yeah, and that's a really, that's a long conversation in and of itself that we probably should talk about. We could talk with some other business people about it. But I do agree with you. When we were in the survival stage, there was many people close to us that would ask, what are you doing? Like, you're just crazy. You're working 100 hours a week. You don't see anybody. You just work. And, you know, those are the same people that today will say, I knew you could do it. I knew you could do it. I knew you'd be successful. I knew it. You know, we knew it. Right? But they weren't the cheerleaders. They were just the, what are you doing? And I think it comes from two things, or one big thing. I think, two. One of them is those people genuinely do care, I believe.
They see you in pain, if you will, and so they're genuinely concerned about it.
Yeah, I think they're genuinely concerned. Why are you putting yourself through this much pain? Why are you putting yourself through these late nights and you know, marriage challenges? And why are you putting yourself through all this? So I think there's that aspect. And then there's the other aspect, again, this is just my opinion, of the could be jealousy that they didn't take a leap when they should have or could have. And there's regret there, because they're seeing you be successful or strive for success. Not that we were very successful early on, and even still today, right? And so I think there's that dynamic of, you know, and I think about this in our life. We made no money early on, almost zero. You were a school teacher and I was straight commission, right? We've talked about that in our story. And there was people our age, married, buying houses, and just fast forwarding way past us. I'm sure you agree, and you know all those people, right? And so in the back of my mind sometimes, because I'm competitive and I want to raise my status, would think about that. Mm-hmm. Well, now, where we are today, I don't think about that anymore. I actually hope and wish more people get involved in business and do what we did so they can have what we have. But you have a different mindset. I had a different mindset early on, very different mindset early on of, man, they're so much farther ahead than us. How are we ever going to afford a house? How are we ever going to, afford adoption? How are we ever going to do X, Y, and Z? How are we ever going to get you out of your 1998 Mustang that was dying, right? Like,
it was a gift.
Yeah, that was a gift. Praise the Lord. Thank you, Sarah. We love you. But You know, does that make sense? Like, there's that aspect. So,
and I think too that's maybe where, so you have those people when you're in survival mode. You have those people that whether they mean well or not, they're telling you like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? How can you be doing this? And my perspective was like, you're right. What are we doing? Like, you already are doubting yourself. You're already in a place of survival, like where you don't
last thing you need is somebody to help doubt
yourself. And so
yourself.
then you go home and you're like questioning everything. You're like, yeah, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? And that's where I think you make a conscious but unconscious decision to like kind of cut those people off for a little bit, because if you don't, you won't move forward.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think you start to lose people.
Well, and Patrick Bet-David, in this conversation that he had, this talk, and in the manual, he goes, I think it's actually in this section, is he talks about you have to move into a different room. If you are the most important person, the most knowledgeable, the most wealthy, the most anything in that room, you have to move. You know, if you're a real estate agent, you're selling the most houses than anybody in the entire state or whatever, time for a new room. You need to get into a region where you're the lowest guy, nobody knows your name, and you're nothing.
It's uncomfortable.
Because it's uncomfortable. Right. Because you don't know anybody, you haven't done it before, so is it even possible for you to do? You don't have any friends anymore in that circle, so you got to make new friends, that's uncomfortable. And so I think a lot of what you said right there, number one is true, and number two holds people back from becoming more successful or finding their purpose or getting into freedom. And they stay in this level of status, this comfort zone. Nothing, in my opinion, nothing you and I have done since we've been married for 13 years has been comfortable. Nothing.
There's been a lot of uncomfortable.
There has been so much uncomfort. And we're in a new setting. So if you're watching on YouTube, new setting. We've finally officially moved to the great state of Sunshine State of Florida. We've got the windows open, the doors open. It's dead of winter up in New England, and it is beautiful. So if you're in New England or Minnesota and you're listening right now, I feel bad for you, but not really. You could move too. And there's great opportunities. So release your mind and spread your wings and fly. But we're not going to tell you where we live because we don't want you to visit us. So I'm just kidding. So my point to that is you need to understand that if you do want to grow, and not everybody wants to grow, we want to grow, that it's going to be uncomfortable. You will go through these 4 stages. The status stage, again, I don't think there's anything wrong with being in it. You know, unless you are that selfish person that doesn't care about anybody except the bottom dollar.
Just need to check your motivations, check your heart. Where is it all coming from?
Right, where is it coming from?
And that's, to speak on that too, that's no one else's business. No one else can tell you what your motivating factors are. No one else can tell you where your heart is. No one else can tell you. That's between you and Jesus and your partner.
Right.
But I think those are just things that you need to check if you're in this.
Well, people will always tell you their opinion, whether
correct.
It's you have to decide to listen or not listen.
Correct. And again, this is where you might need to leave some people behind and continue to move forward.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So this was a very interesting stage for us, for sure. Definitely made some mistakes in it, made some progress in it.
And I would say a lesson learned is that it wasn't that great.
Yeah, not a great stage. If I'm recommending anything and you take anything for this, try to move through this stage relatively quickly as possible. I would say the first 2 stages, if you can move the first 3 stages quickly, I think you would enjoy the next two a lot better because they're more motivating and there's freedom and purpose there. So I guess that's what I would say. This has been a good conversation. I think we probably should have a conversation about moving into different rooms. There's a whole bunch of stuff from that book and from our experience that we could talk about. So that may be a good conversation that we have. So other than that, any final words on status? Nothing? Nothing. She's got nothing. All right, I got nothing either. Thank you guys for listening, watching. If you are, welcome to us, to the great state of Florida. We're excited. So we'll catch you guys on the next episode.